Hello and welcome back to Doubles and Trebles. You'll notice I'm joined by a familiar face to some regular viewers on the channel, but you've got to go back a little while. It's a while since we had Ozzy Smith on, but I've managed to rope Ozzy in to preview this year's World Seniors Darts Championship, which actually starts today. So we're a little late to the party in terms of previewing this tournament, but it's not really one on Adam's radar. Adam's very clear with what he does do, what he doesn't do. So I'm a big lover of the World Series Seniors, and I know Ozzy is too. So we're going to have a quick run through this event. But just to give you some background first, this is the second renewal of the World Seniors Darts Championship. Started last year, and I'm expecting increased interest and probably increased quality compared with last year's inaugural tournament, which was, of course, won by Robert Thornton. A really worthy winner in the end. He averaged around 92 across the 4 days. Really respectable standard, that. And dumped out the likes of Phil Taylor, Kevin Painter, and Martin Adams in a one-sided final. We've seen averages in that region win Pro Tour titles last year, so this is not an event to be sniffed at as an exhibition, even if the first round probably will throw up the odd stinking performance. It started off this idea as a one-off event, but it's now actually become a full-blown tour. So we have the World Seniors Match Play and the World Seniors Masters actually making for a kind of triple crown, I suppose. And it gives these players age 50 or over the chance to still play in front of packed out venues such as the Circus Tavern, play on TV and compete for some very decent prize money. It was 30 grand to the winner last year, and the overall prize pot has more than doubled this year to £200,000. So certainly one you want to go far in. I think I'll bring in Ozzy at this point. So Ozzy, while I get up the betting odds for this tournament, let's start with your thoughts on the seniors as a whole and what
Mhm.
you're expecting this time around compared to last year.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit of like a bit of nostalgia when it first came back. It was a bit last minute. There was the broadcaster was very last minute. Everything just seemed a bit rushed and it had been thrown together, cobbled together. But actually, when you watched it, it was quite good to watch. And there was some poor darts on show, which is understandable from a lot of the older heads. But some of the more younger seniors, like Robert Thornton, who I think had just lost his tour card or was, had been to Q school as well. He performed, like admirably. And if he could average 92 throughout, he would not be losing his tour card on the PDC. He would go deep in some tournaments. It's consistent, solid darts, and if you can replicate that, you're going to go far. It's returned this year, in terms of like you say, a wider competition. There's definitely more interest. I would say, there's still some names that a lot of people won't necessarily have heard of, but I would say there's definitely bigger names now involved. And I think some of these will be taking it quite serious. Phil Taylor, I think, came in last year and just saw it as a bit of I'll chuck some darts and that's it. And actually, he was a shadow of what he was. And Robert Thornton wiped the floor with him. I think Taylor was actually fortunate to win his first game last year in the Worlds. So yeah, a really, really likable tournament. B tier behind it, publicising it. The fact that the prize money on offer has doubled shows that they know there's worth in it, and the tickets sell as well. And it's a format that I think you can get behind. I'm not necessarily sure about some of the criteria, just an age thing. Prime example, Scotty Mitchell is fresh off losing his tour card, was unlucky not to get one at Q School, and now he's bounced onto this. I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but it shows the clout in it that Robert Thornton opted not to go to Q School so he
Yeah.
could defend his world title of the seniors, which says it all, really. And I think, they clearly might know a lot more than what's publicised at the moment. But if it is gathering momentum, Thornton might see it that I can actually play, modus type of leagues, other bits and pieces, but also as well compete in these like larger tournaments without really having to qualify as such, but still earn decent money rather than graft it out on the circuit. Not necessarily, you get paid the big bucks and you have to perform to get into the bigger tournaments as well.
Yeah, well, look, I've got to have a flick through last year's 3 events, but I can tell you right now, Robert Thornton winning 2 of them and winning 40 grand for those 2 victories. So if we just think about that in terms of the PDC Pro Tour, a lot of players don't get near 40 grand in their first year of earnings. And really, the only place you make your big money on the PDC circuit is qualifying for the big TV events. And if you're someone like Thornton, it's surely a lot more logical option to try and mop up the money on this seniors circuit than it is to try and go toe to toe with your Van Gerwen's, Prices, Wrights, and co on the Pro Tour. I don't think it's unambitious. I think it's savvy from people like Robert Thornton and Scott Mitchell to eye up this tour. Hopefully, the interest is there and it is sustained, and it's well run. Because I'd agree with you. Last year there were some bad moments. I thought some of the TV production, TV quality wasn't the best. I guess we've got to expect this first time round. But
Who showed it last year?
It was BT Sport, and BBC also had access via the red button, which I believe is the same setup this year. So you can watch it on BBC Sport, but you can. I don't know if that's all games or selected games. And BT do have the bulk of the coverage. But I mean, I seem to recall, for example, Bobby George was on the coverage, and I seem to recall they had him sort of perched up against a wall for the best part of 5 hours. Couldn't get him even a chair to sit down in, him and Ray Stubbs. And by the end of it, Bobby looked like he was ready to keel over. I mean, just little things like that, let's hope that they've learnt from, all these events are bound to, especially when they're low budget like they were last year. Let's hope that they've got the proper money, proper planning into it this year, and we're going to see a more polished product. But yeah, I'd agree with you. Some of the stuff we saw on the board was arguably as good as what you see on some average Pro Tour weekends. So certainly plenty of excitement and intrigue there for me. The action does get underway this afternoon. I think the best way to go at this is probably going to be to have a quick look at the outright betting and then just go through match by match and then maybe talk about our outright fancies if we have any. Before that, I'm just going to quickly run through last year's tournament and get that up on your screen now. So Robert Thornton, the winner, beating Martin Adams in the final. As we can see, Phil Taylor actually came into this as an even money favourite, but he just about scraped past Dieter Hedman and Peter Manley with averages in the 70s and low 80s. So by the time he bumped into Kevin Painter, he was absolutely demolished. And I think, no after timing on this channel, but I can safely say that we all benefited from that, the pricing in that Taylor match where he was instilled as a favourite to beat Kevin Painter, who had averaged 94 and 85. So, I mean, sometimes nostalgia definitely blinds people's opinions when it comes to assessing these kind of events. And that's one to bear in mind for this year's renewal, I think. We then had the World Seniors Darts Masters, which was a surprise victory for David Cameron, the Canadian qualifier, who we went on to see win his first game at the Ali Pali World Championships. David Cameron is in this year's Seniors renewal. He had a fantastic run, didn't he? Beating Kevin Painter, beating Robert Thornton, and then beating Richie HOWSON, who's certainly a man to watch, and then beating Phil Taylor in the final. So that was majestic from Cameron, and I think that shows you just how important it is to assess these players who possibly didn't have the glittering career of a Taylor or a Thornton, but in this kind of company and playing the dart of their life can be very, very dangerous. We finished the seniors tour last year with the World Match Play, which again was won by Robert Thornton. Phil Taylor making a second consecutive final. So definitely signs that Taylor was starting to take things a little bit more seriously, I think. But still, if I look at his averages here, 75, 80, 88 and 85, certainly improvement. That was a very good performance to edge out Kevin Painter. But, I wouldn't be rushing to back Taylor. And I think, the fact that we have Taylor here as 11-2 rather than evens as he was last year shows that people have realised he's potentially not the force of old. That leads us on to this betting market, which this is as of the 9th of February in 11 a.m. So a couple of hours ahead of our first game. Scott Mitchell, as Ozzy mentioned, heads up the betting. Best price of 11-2, generally sort of 5s, 9-2. Phil Taylor is in there as a second favourite at 6s. We then have Robert Thornton out at 7s. I'm sure that will interest some and surprise some, having seen him win 2 of the 3 events last year. Martin Adams, the finalist from last year, is in there at 9s. And as you can see, a bit of blue around Leonard Gates, who's been backed late in the day. The American, we saw him at Ali Pali winning his first match and then giving Stephen Bunting a decent game in round 2 as well. So, yeah, no surprise to see a bit of interest in Gates. Cameron, last year's match player winner, in there at 12s as well. Chris Mason, first time we've seen Mace on the tour. We did see him at the Modus Super Series in October, and he was extremely impressive. No, Mace is a fairly regular viewer of the channel, so good luck if you are watching Mace. We're all cheering you on. Yeah, Mace was fantastic at the Super Series, averaging over a ton, 10 darter on the bull. It was glorious to watch, and he's very much worthy at the top of the betting in this field, I feel. Kev Painter, a name we saw at the end of several tournaments last year, also at 14s. WDF champion Neil Duffin at 14s. Richie Howson, an interesting one, as low as 9-1 in some places, but nearly double that in others as well. And worth noting on Richie Howson that he is a local guy to Purfleet in Essex, so he has a lot of his friends and family in attendance, as we saw last year, so there'll be a raucous crowd supporting Richie Howson. And then the last couple that I'm going to reference in the betting, Colin McGarry, who proved himself as a very capable qualifier last year and takes on Phil Taylor in the opening round, could be a potential upset there. And Flash Dudbridge, who I think is a potential dark horse at 33-1, but we could get onto that anyway. Ozzy, your first thoughts on that sort of top bit of the market? Is there any prices that catch your eye in particular?
Yeah, there's no shocks as such from, like, you know, the favourites, that sort of things. Scott Mitchell, understandably, is right up there. I mean, I think he's still competing on the Challenge Tour at the moment as well, so he's playing regular darts, solid darts, and doing quite well.
I've been in the 90s, so yeah.
Yeah, so Mitchell is probably quite right, the favourite. I think a lot of prices on there are based on previous CVs and not actual current form. Understandably, because as we were saying before we started recording, it's hard to track some of what these guys are doing. Robert Thornton, I'm surprised he's as wide as he is actually at 8s. I mean, you know, this is a guy who's won 2 out of the 3 tournaments and ultimately played well, you know, every time, and, you know, averaging, you know, in the 90s. You've got to play better to beat him, and there's not many that showed last year just on averages alone. Taylor, I definitely think he'll be taking it more serious. I think, you know, more for his ego more than anything. Does he want to be coming on this, you know, seniors tour and you know, he got to one final, you know, a couple of finals, but hasn't won? I think he wants to be starting winning. But again, his price doesn't interest me. The one that I do like is Richie Howson.
Yeah.
I think that's a big price, and, you know, particularly, you know, the disparity in the odds as well. I definitely think, you know, he was unfortunate. I think he's got an unfortunate draw again. I do think he'll pinch this over 5 sets. But again, he showed quality in last year's seniors tournament, and also as well in the Modus League. He's been playing incredible darts. And a big shout out to Chris Mason as well, who again seems like he's prepped, not done a lot of punditry stuff, that sort of things. You know, he's usually on ITV. I think he's chosen not to prepare for this. I think it shows how serious he's taking it. And he, you know, when you are playing regularly enough and doing well in like the Modus stuff, you've got to look at these guys. You know, I think DUDBRIDGE as well. I'm pretty sure he went to Q school again? I'm pretty sure.
He did.
He did okay.
We've seen a little bit of him on the lesser circuits, and I believe he's been doing a bit of practice in Benidorm.
I've seen that. It's true.
Reading Paul Nicholson's column. So interested to see how he goes. I mean, some of the numbers we've seen from Mark Dudbridge and his limited public appearances have been really encouraging, and I think he's he's one of the younger competitors in this field, and it's such a tight packed schedule this over 4 days, a lot of darts to be played, and I do think that Thornton was still very much match sharp, wasn't he? And I think it maybe did for Taylor and Martin Adams in the latter stages of these events. You know, the intensity of this 4-day schedule. So anyway, let's have a whiz through these matches. We won't go through every single one in detail, but I mean, kicking off with Terry Jenkins, Chris Mason, to me, Ozzy, looks a very tight affair.
You've got to feel for the pair of them, really, haven't you? It's a terrible draw from a perspective of 2 guys who'll probably fancy themselves to go quite deep. You know, Jenkins showed that, you know, he's still got quality, steady Eddie, isn't he, type of thing, you know, mid-80s, that sort of stuff.
That's exactly what you're going to get from him.
Yeah, exactly. And we just touched on Mason then about, you know, obviously happy to be involved, and the way he kind of rolled back the years somewhat in the Modus leagues. And flying. I would side with, you know, I think it could go the distance, you know, like a 3-2 type of thing. And I would edge Chris Mason in it on form And I think, the practice that he's been putting in, not saying Jenkins isn't, but I think the form that he showed in the Modus Leagues will give him undoubted, a big rise of confidence to go in there. But as I say, a terrible draw for the pair of them, with no disrespect, but with some of the other players on offer potentially, they are unfortunate to draw each other. But if you want to win tournaments, you do have to play some of the better players to get to the final.
You do. No arguments from me there. Chris Mason, a worthy favourite. I think Jenkins is just going to hit his level of the low to mid 80s, and if Mace can bring what we saw a couple of months ago, I think he can edge it. But a good game to kick off the tournament. Les Wallace there as one of these. I mean, there are some 500 to 1 rags at the bottom of this market who, on their public appearances, Les Wallace, Bob Anderson, Peter Manley, Trina Gulliver, where when we've last seen them, they've just looked to have sort of gone at the game a little bit, but they're still fair play. They're still turning up to give the crowd something. I mean, who could forget Bob Anderson's 180 and iconic finger point last year? I mean, it came in a 3-0 drubbing, but it was a really nice moment. And that is partly, if you're in attendance at the Circus Tavern, it's one of the things you've gone to see in it. You've gone to see legends of the game having nice moments, rather than bringing the standard that they brought in their peak. But yeah, not expecting Les Wallace to get much change out of Daryl Fitton there. Another very tight match with Dave Cameron and Richie Howson. I think we touched on this. Two fellas who both, sub 20 to 1, sub 16 to 1 to win this tournament. One of them is going to go at the first hurdle once again. If I was to tackle this match, I think Richie Howson's a better at odds against. I think Dave Cameron, will be better for his. Obviously, he's had that fantastic win, but you just wonder whether he's going to be able to sort of, replicate that, or whether he's peaked on the senior circuit with that win. I don't know if he's somebody who's, he'll be taken a lot more seriously now as a result of that. Richie Howson is a nightmare opening game for him. And as I've said, he's going to have a very rowdy crowd behind him. He's shown a love for the TV. And yeah, it's a tough game. You wouldn't be surprised again if it goes 5 sets, but I think Houghton can probably edge him out here with what is effectively a home advantage. That'd be where I'd be looking. Would you agree with that, Oz?
I agree. Yeah, spot on again. Yeah. And it's the form he's shown as well recently that in a tournament of very few like research you can do, recent form is king, and he's showing that. And as well, home advantage. It's different, for darts. A lot of it is neutral venue, but I think, the crowd will play a big part in this. And yeah, in his back garden, playing well, I think over even money is certainly a price that can't be ignored.
Yeah. Larry Butler versus Darren Johnson is an interesting tie. I'll say it now. I think if you were lucky to have a bet at somebody at the bottom end of the market, I think Darren Johnson is an interesting runner. He's 100 to 1. Currently, there are a few Pieman pennies on him, not much, but yeah, he's a qualifier here, Darren Johnson. One of these, again, he kind of fits that profile of David Cameron, where he hasn't had a glittering career as a pro. He's maybe playing some of his better darts in his later years. I'm still not sure he's playing at a level where he could go and win this tournament, but I think he could have a run, definitely, because he qualified for this by winning one of the open qualifiers. There was 100 odd people in that qualifier. So to come out and prevail in that, he beat Andy Jenkins, won a close final as well, 6-5. So he's shown a good bit of bottle. He also won the Northern Ireland Open last year, which is, it's been won by some really big names in the past. Gary Anderson, former winner of that. A lot of like BDO stalwarts have won that. Again, he had to beat some really good players to lift that title. So he's in the habit of winning at the moment, and I think the Yorkshireman can go on a good little run here. However, he has got a challenging first round against Larry Butler, the experienced American who just loves playing darts, just keeps turning up and keeps, bringing his best. And you just tell he's got an immense love for the game. But whether he's going to be able to overcome Darren Johnson, I'm not so sure. I think if Johnson gets through this, I could see him having a little bit of a sneaky run there. One I'm going to hand over to Oz for, maybe not so much in this match, Kevin Painter facing Ronnie Baxter. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we'd been rubbing our hands at this game, Oz. But Kev Painter, a very strong favourite based on what we've seen from both recently. Do you think Kevin Painter is a dangerous runner in this tournament as a whole?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. And he seemed to enjoy the format last year in the overall tournament. 15 years ago, I think we were saying this would have been a Premier League tie.
Yeah.
You know, both Painter and Baxter were in the Premier League, you know, were well supported, well liked as well. Obviously, you know, Baxter in particular, I think he's almost been anonymous. I have no idea what he's been doing. You know, I think this is it this his first real run out? I think, you know, has he
I
had
think
one
he's
sniff
got.
at the
Is he a
match player
delivery? It's
thing?
like a delivery driver or something now,
Something
or
like
something.
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
he's gone
yeah.
right out of darts, which is fair enough, you know.
Yeah, I think, you know, he might play a bit locally or something like that,
Yeah.
but nothing major. And I think, yeah, all avenues point to Kevin Painter. And, you know, like we were talking about, you know, some difficult draws. I think Painter would, if you were to offer him this first up, it's something that he'd snap his hand off, you know, again, unless, you know, Baxter's been, you know, doing loads of work behind the scenes, but from all the reports, he's not. And it wouldn't shock me if Painter sweeps this, you know, 3-0.
Yeah.
Baxter may pinch a set, but I wouldn't mind seeing the price for 3-0, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Two guys who go way back, so I'm sure Kevin
Yeah.
Painter won't take it lightly, but you would expect him to have no issues really. Dennis Harbour takes on Trina Gulliver, the Golden Girl. It was nice to see her on the TV last year, and she had a couple of flashes of her old self, but Trina's best days, you know, well behind her now. Unfortunately, she be competing on the PDC Women's Series, not doing too badly, but really, you know, not struggling to live with the likes of Bo Greaves, Lisa Ashton, and Fallon Sherrock. So you would think she would struggle to live with some of these, as reflected in her 500-1 outright odds. Dennis Harbour, again, not a big name, but a very solid operator. And the fact he's 1-7 to win this probably tells you all you need to know. I think we can probably skip past that game. Martin Adams, you know, dangerous, former finalist in this last year. Countless BDO successes, a real legend of the game. It's a difficult first round draw against Dave Prinz. Prinz qualified for this tournament last year and averaged in the 90s in his first two games before the wheels, you know, fell off a bit against Robert Thornton. You know, I think Adams could have had an easier start to things, but I would expect him to find a way past Prinz. Oz, you've already touched on Scott Mitchell doing great things on the Challenge Tour, and he takes on Carlisle legend Peter Manley, who I will be, you know, enjoying watching again. But I think Peter is the first to tell you that he is a little bit gone at the game now. And you know, he tried to get himself up for the battle with Phil Taylor last year, rolling back the years. He nicked a set off Phil, which he was not expected to do by the bookmakers, but that was more through Taylor's low level than Manley's high level. I think Manley has said in a couple of interviews he effectively is just turning up to help sell the product. So, you know, I don't think he's putting too much expectation on himself. Maybe he will surprise us, but the fact that Scott Mitchell is a best price of 1-20 probably tells you all you need to know about that game. I'll bring Ozzy back in for some of the more interesting games, but just to skip over a couple. You know, starting tomorrow's action, we have Bob Anderson against Andy Jenkins. As I say, Andy Jenkins, a possible dark horse in this tournament because he's, you know, produced some good darts recently since coming back to the amateur circuits. I may have had a go at Q School. Can't really, you know, I've taken a hell of a lot of darts, so I may be getting mixed up there. He's got a gift of a draw against 75-year-old Bob Anderson, I think, who again will be looking for a magic moment rather than a magic victory. And then at the bottom of the show, we have another supposed mismatch with Robert Thornton, who we've mentioned plenty. He is a best price of sort of 1-8, 1-9 to beat Roland Sholton, who, as Oz points out, we've not seen a lot of Sholton in recent times. Back in the day, in the BDO days, this could have been a good game, but it's going to be a walk in the park for Thornton, I think. So the other 6 games look relatively competitive, I think. Neil Duff taking on Lisa Ashton, Oz. Neil
Bit
Duff,
of a coin flip.
yeah, WDF champion. He's been put in as a favourite, but I mean, Lisa Ashton's certainly playing at a good level, possibly more regularly than Duff, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ashton is somewhat, you know, more in the shadows now from what she was a few years ago, you know, with Bo Greaves breaking onto the scene, and obviously the PDC Golden Girl Fallon Sherrock, who, you know, she convincingly gets beat and they still buzz off her and think she's, you know, the best thing since sliced bread. So yeah, for Ashton, it's a chance for her, you know, this is a tournament from where she should be entering. She's obviously on the women's circuit as well, which
Yeah.
is fine. But like these sort of tournaments from where, we were talking about the opportunities to earn money. This is a good example from where she can actually, she has got the quality to has beat anybody in this tournament.
Oh, she has.
And I am not, I've been critical of her, because I think some of the performances she has turned in, particularly, when at Q School and on the Pro Tour, have been awful, appalling and, far below what she can throw. I think, this is a game from where, she's probably, can get herself up for it, actually. I think, the price, I'm certainly shocked that she's as wide as, I think, just under 2-1.
Yeah.
I think that's a good bet, in all honesty. I get, Duff being the favourite. I understand that, they're literally being priced off, given he's, a current WDF world champion. Yeah. But, Lisa Ashton's won a fair share of tournaments as well, and she has competed and has some scalps on the PDC tour as well. I think it'll be close. I think Ashton is value. I think it could go the distance. A result either way wouldn't surprise me, if it's 3-2 either way. If I had to pick a winner, I'd probably naturally pick Duff on the basis of what it is. But I do think Ashton is more than live. And if anything, I see it a bit tighter. So anything you can get near 2-1, for me, is value.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I couldn't put anyone off Lisa Ashton. 100-1 in the outrights versus Neil Duff 14-1. That looks like a big disparity to me. But yeah, I mean, as I say, it's not so much anything against Neil Duff. It's just, Lisa Ashton in this company may well be capable of causing an upset. She was a bit disappointing on the seniors tour last year, but one performance that did encourage me was when she won 8-4 against Larry Butler. I know the 80 average probably doesn't do it credit, but she was in control of that game against an opponent who, needs to be respected. And she beat Paul Hogan as well in the qualifier as well. So them couple of wins in the last event of the seniors calendar last year should fill her with confidence going into this one, you would think. Tony O'Shea takes on Leonard Gates. As I say, a lot of money for Leonard Gates in the outright market. I think what we learned from Leonard Gates' flirtation with the PDC circuit last year is a very capable scorer, but very erratic. Can be very unreliable on his doubles. His counting is not great, but on talent and class alone, he probably does have too much for Tony O'Shea. However, there's a nostalgic part of me thinking that if the Silverback can bring, some of his 180 hitting, which we did see in flashes during his last seniors appearance, then he could give Gates, a contest, make it a tight contest. However, at the prices, I'm happy to leave it alone. I'll probably watch it. Should be an enjoyable game to watch because Gates is a character and Tony O'Shea, also a likable guy. Keith Deller, Oz, if I can ask you a little bit about Keith, he's a 5-2 underdog here to beat Michael Huntley, the qualifier. On the numbers, that's probably about right. But I know, having read on social media, I think Keith Taylor had high hopes for the seniors last year, the way he was practicing, and wasn't able to transfer that onto the board. You got to think that he's going to want to give a better showing of himself this year, and he could have had worse draws, couldn't he?
Yeah, you would think so. But again, recent form has shown otherwise. Again, at the Modus Live Leagues, he's been poor, poor for a guy who, said he's been practicing well and, had high hopes. His performance is actually on the board from where ultimately that's where it counts. Haven't reflected that. I think Huntley's he's a qualifier, isn't he? So yeah, on paper, Della will be thinking, well, if I can get a qualifier, that's great. But you can argue as well, he's probably the form player. Well, he is the form player of the two because he's won a qualifier to get here. Probably played darts more recently, definitely more competitive darts as well. So again, I understand why I think Huntley, is the favourite, and I agree with it really. Again, there's nothing that you can say from Della that he would really have to roll back the years. But I think, a 3-0 win for Huntley wouldn't surprise me. Della may pinch a set, 3-0, 3-1. I don't see it going the distance, but yeah, I get, Huntley is a worthy favourite for sure.
Yeah. John Parko Stumpy.
Yeah, the matchstick man.
The matchstick makes his return. Nobody's seen him for the best part of a decade. very capable player on his day. He's been practicing with Roland Sholton. Sholton's been pretty coy on how well or not well it's been going for Co. But I know Stompy's still quite prevalent on the Dutch coverage of darts. So, Dutch fans are still used to seeing him with a microphone in his hand. But we aren't used to seeing him with a dart in his hand. He takes on John Part here. Now, John Part, at times in the last few years, has flirted with, going to get his card back at Q School. So, unfortunately, we didn't really see that level from Darth Maple last year. He was beaten 3-1 by John Walton, averaging 74. That was disappointing, it must be said. He smashed up Paul Lim 4-0 in a qualifier in the match play and set up an exciting rematch with his old nemesis Phil Taylor, only to get wiped 4-0 there. So the 11-10 loss to Peter Manley was a particular hammer blow for Part because, as we said, Manley somewhat gone at the game. So, to not beat Peter Manley, who was averaging 72, will have no doubt bitterly disappointed John. He's a fiercely competitive guy. I enjoyed listening to his podcast on the PDC channel recently. But yeah, I don't know what to make of this game really, and I think I can see why it's been priced so tightly. It all depends on how Stompy plays, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Ultimately, you say about Manley being, essentially what you describe in boxing as a shot fighter, and Manley as a shot dart player, and I'd be inclined, to potentially put John Part in this bracket, to be honest. It's all right talking about saying you're going to flirt with it and I fancy going to Q School, but he's not done that for a few years now. And ultimately, why would he? He's a prominent name when it comes to darts coverage on Sky. He is a leading pundit. And if you watch in terms of commentary and punditry, him and, what's his name? Well, Mark, what's his last name? Mark Webster, yeah. If you watch that along with Wayne Mardle and they're not on it, you're thinking, well, where are they? Because that's why they are there. And I think, understandably, Part is he'll be earning a good career from that. The Premier League soon to return as well. I think he's just trying to maybe see what he's got left. But again, he could come up against Cole Stompy, who is an absolute, we have no idea. He could be a Peter Manley. He could be, he could roll back the years like Robert Thornton does as well. Yeah. It's hard to predict a winner. You can't confidently back Part of what he's shown. I mean, like I said, he conceded 11 legs to Peter Manley, who has been awful. And admittedly, he turns up just to help sell an event, which shows what he really thinks. So, yeah, it's one from where if I had to pick a winner and it's a complete, just punt, I'd side with Stompy.
Yeah.
On the basis of, basically, why not? From what I've seen of Part, he's averaging 70. And even when he beat Paul Lim, just looking at the averages were quite tight. So you can probably owe to the fact that Lim's probably missed a few doubles as well. Well, he must have done. You can't average 82 and your opponent average 81 and you don't miss doubles. It's nigh on impossible to do that. And I mean, that's a typical Lim performance, basically. So, I would probably side with Cole Stompy, but in reality, it is
a guessing game.
Well, it is, it's a guessing game, yeah.
It is. Yeah. But yeah, makes for a very interesting match, and it's not very often you go into a game and you're not sure you're really not sure what to expect. So I'll definitely be tuning in for that one. 2 games left to run through. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Mark Dudbridge is someone I'm potentially eyeing up. I may get a late involvement in at 33-1 in the outright. I like the numbers that he's posted recently when we've seen him. I like the fact that he's a little bit, younger than some of his colleagues, and he's just been a little bit off the radar. It could be a little bit of a David Cameron style, just sneaks through, playing some steady darts. Glenn Durran was a really a huge market mover in this. He was instilled at 100-1 when the betting was first shown, and Glenn took to Twitter himself to say that he felt that that was a very big price. He was subsequently backed into 25-1. I would just give a word of warning there that Keith Deller did exactly the same last year, and it didn't really work out well for him. Glenn, again, we talk about hard players to assess. Glenn's last couple of years on the Pro Tour have been horrible to watch. I mean, this is someone who won the Premier League 3 years ago, and he is just suffered a terrible time since picking up COVID. Really struggled to re-find his best starts. But yeah, I mean, if he wins a tournament on the amateur circuit recently, says he's getting some confidence back. Glenn Durrant at 50% would win this tournament easily. But I've not seen anything to tell me that Glenn Durrant is at 50%. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like, you know, it's scary as to the way he's lost his form, you know, like everything, you know, like a bout of illness, and literally he is a shadow of what he was. This is a guy who, you know, was, you know, taking scalp after scalp on the PDC circuit. He won the Premier League, was playing up there with the very best. I can't remember where he got to in the rankings, but I'm sure he was top 15, maybe even top 10. You know, that if you were saying 2 years ago, anybody, you were to pick a top 10 now and then saying 2 years they're going to go on the seniors tour, they'd walk it. Absolutely walk it.
Yeah.
And with Durrant, he has dropped, you know, just abysmally, you know, just gone down and down and down. And we're not just talking about winning matches. He was barely winning legs at times, you know, like he was just getting all over the place. And again, you know, he might have come out and maybe taken offence to it somewhat that he was priced at 100 to 1. But, you know, what should he have been priced at, really? Because this is a guy, like we say, who's just shown nothing. Borderline dartitis as such from, you know, how badly he's dropped off, you know, not necessarily knowing, but, you know, in terms of like just so unpredictable. And yeah, he's quite rightly, in my opinion, the outsider against Mark Dudbridge, quite right. And I was saying about, you know, on the amateur tour, and yes, he's got that win, but realistically, who against? Some lads who play county level, who might actually have felt the pressure of playing Glenn Durrant.
Yeah, definitely.
What were the averages? What was it like? You know, if Durrant was averaging, you know, like 88 to 90, maybe even higher, then yeah, you can say, actually, is he discovering some of that form again? If he was averaging 65, 70 at a push 75, that's not going to be good enough to go anywhere in this tournament whatsoever. But we'll learn a lot from this game, I think, where Durrant's at. But it is different from, you know, playing on the floor of an amateur circuit compared to getting up on the stage from where there will be a crowd there. It'll be boisterous, but I do think he will be supported there as well.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Glenn Durrant, it's a price is everything for us on this channel, and I think at 100 to 1, I could totally understand why somebody would chance it. You know, that he may rediscover some of his best stuff. But at 33 to 1, there's just more attractive propositions for me in that outright market. And Mark Dudbridge, his opponent there, is one of them. I mean, they're both 33 to 1, but then when we look at the game, Mark Dudbridge has actually been backed into a fairly decent favourite to prevail 4 to 7. So I think the late money is probably telling the story there, and Glenn will have to show something that we haven't seen from him for quite a while if he is to go far in this tournament. I expect Dudbridge, you know, from all the noises are that he's really taking this seriously. And when a younger player, a little bit more unexposed, who does a lot of their preparation out of the public limelight. I mean, we did see him at the Motor Super Series last year, and he looked really good. So yeah, I just like a bit of the noise around Mark Dudbridge. I think he could be an interesting runner, especially if he beats Glenn Durrant in his first game, he's going to be feeling really good about it, isn't he, going forward? Fittingly, the last game we have to talk about is Phil Taylor, the Power. As we say, even money favourite last year going into it. He was a shadow of his former self, but he did make finals at the Masters and the match play. So he's not come here, as you said, Oz, to make up the numbers. He wants to lift trophies this year. Very, very much a banana skin potentially against Colin McGarry, though, who showed himself to be very capable last year. When qualifying, and it was only Kevin Painter that stopped him in the Masters 8-5 after he knocked out Keith Deller and Peter Everson. That game against Pete Everson, he won 8-0, averaging 95.43. I mean, any kind of repeat of that, Phil Taylor's going to be going home at the first hurdle, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a terrible draw for Taylor. You know, it is awful, and it's more than just a banana skin. This is just a complete legit, you know. I would see it as somewhat 50-50, really. You know,
yeah,
literally,
I would as well.
I would price it as, you know, like a Cole Stompy John Part type of thing, of, you know, basically even money, or 10 to 11, 10 to 11, because this is, you know, I think, basically McGarry would be a favourite against a lot of
Well,
players.
look at this. This tells you a story. Everywhere is cutting the price
Right.
of Colin McGarry, and Phil
Yeah.
Taylor is drifting. And I think, we talk about the amount that nostalgia plays in the
Yep.
early pricing of these markets. And as we get closer and closer to the off, the people that actually crunch the numbers and look at the data make their assumptions and get involved. And I think what we're seeing here is that the numbers are telling a story that Colin McGarry has a real chance of knocking out
Absolutely.
Phil Taylor here.
Yeah, he's gone deep on the senior tour a few times, averaging in the 90s. McGarry as well.
Yeah.
I think Taylor will be taking it seriously. I think he knows that if he doesn't practice and rock up to this, he'll get beat, and
Yeah.
not just get beat as well, but it'll be in a style from where Taylor, he doesn't want to be beaten like that. It's a bit different in the PDC, coming up against the likes of Gerwin Price and Michael van Gerwen. You can get turned over, 6-0 in the Premier League at times, of which Taylor did to other people as well. But for this, I still think, like I say, it's an ego thing, and he will be practicing. I think if he doesn't get off to a quick start, and maybe get a set on the board early, Taylor, I think it could be curtains for him. So again, it's going to be a good game. Undoubtedly, now the way we've bigged up Colin McGarry, he'll go and get beat 3-0, which would be absolutely typical. But he's certainly in this. He's coming to win. It's an opponent from where, like, from his perspective, I'm playing Phil Taylor here. Why wouldn't I want that scalp on my record in this tournament?
Yeah, definitely.
And on this tour. So yeah, I think if you were looking at an outsiders, from like a little treble or something like that, like a 3-2, 3-1 McGarry or something like that, is definitely some value there without a doubt. Or if you just want a flat treble, picking him to win, again, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you there. So hopefully, you've enjoyed that run through of the matches there. I've just got the tournament tree up in my, on my screen now. Hopefully you can see this. One thing to note, I think, that we have in this top half of the draw, Robert Thornton and Scott Mitchell, the two of the top three in the betting, are going to meet in round two, which is just part of the sort of. I know it's impossible to seed this kind of event, but given the amount of new faces and stuff, but having Peter Manley as a seed and Scott Mitchell as a non-seed, and having arguably your two best players in the tournament meet in round two, it's shot itself in the foot a little bit there for me.
Look at Trina Gulliver. How is she 5th seed?
No, exactly.
And it is the seeded off a CV and not, there's no interest in recent form whatsoever. Like Larry Butler is seeded and things like that. And it's just off what has happened like last year as well. Leonard Gates is more deserving of Larry Butler to be seeded because Gates recently completed at the World Championships and won a game, and also pushed Stephen Bunting incredibly hard. I think if Gates had shown a bit more consistency in that game, he might well have beaten Stephen Bunting because his scoring was up there with the best. So yeah, that's something that, look, I think unless you do something, it's incredibly difficult to get the seedings right, but some common sense needs to be used as well. Like I said, no disrespect, but Gulliver should not be a 5th seed. I think Keith Deller's ranked 8 and 9. Again, he's shown nothing to be a top 10 seed whatsoever.
No, it's difficult, but I think it does make a little bit of a mockery of this draw. Like, we've got some very weak areas of the draw for me. I mean, this bottom section here with Part, Stompy, Les Wallace, and Daryl Fitton. One of them is going to be making the quarterfinals. Let's be honest. If those four were to meet, most of this field, they would get beat. So it's the same with every draw. There's always weaker points and stronger points. But I think it's a shame to lose one of Mitchell or Thornton as early as the second game. By the same logic, I've made a case for Mark Dudbridge. The reason I made the case for Mark Dudbridge is more on a price play, because I think Mace, as we've talked about, he's quite rightly picked up some attention for his recent exploit. He's in the outright betting at sort of 14-1 chance. Now, I think Mark Dudbridge is going to beat Glenn Durrant, so I'd much rather be with Mark Dudbridge at 33-1 than Mace at 14. So that's not to say that Mace, if he gets there, won't beat him. It's just a price thing for me. But yeah, another weak area of the draw potentially down here. And notice I'm talking these weak areas of the draws. are the bottom half, generally speaking. I think that's why we see the money for Leonard Gates, because he's got Tony O'Shea round 1. If he can get past Martin Adams provisionally in round 2, he's going to play one of these 4 in the quarter-final, and he's effectively, he's going to be a huge favourite to get to the last 4. So that is why I think, a lot of people are looking at it thinking, who's going to win out of Martin Adams and Leonard Gates, because whoever wins should be in the semis. And that is probably why we've seen money for Leonard Gates. So I couldn't put people off Martin Adams as an each-way play. But yeah,
Richie Howson's
for me, yeah,
well.
you've just teed it up. Richie Howson is the best bet for me at the top of the market, and I know you've gone with the same. It's the section of the draw. If he gets past Dave Cameron, he's let's have a look at it. I mean, he's going to play one of Bob Anderson or Andy Jenkins in round 2, where he'll be a favourite. We've spoken about Phil Taylor's vulnerability. He might not even make it past Colin McGarry. I said I couldn't put people off Darren Johnson at 100. That is more because of how the draws panned out. But yeah, I just think this bottom half of the draw, and then you could potentially be getting to a spot where you've got Leonard Gates versus Richie Howson in the semi-final. You know what I mean? Yeah. Look, he hasn't gone unnoticed in the market, has he, Richie Howson? The fact that he's 16 to 1, but it's with good reason as well. I think if you can take that 16s, I probably wouldn't be rushing to back him at 11, 12. If you can get that 16, I think you get a great run for your money in Richie Howson. And my middle of the range will be Mark DUDBRIDGE at 33, and my absolute long shot will be a couple of pennies on Darren Johnson at 100. Oz, I know you're keen on Richie Howson. Anyone else that you would spare a few pennies for?
I like the price of Mason as well. I think, did you say around 14s? Again, I've spoken a lot about form throughout this video. And he is one of the form dart players. And actually, as well, the draw and the section of the draw he's in, it does lend quite lightly to him. I think if he can come past Terry Jenkins, that is a solid opener. That's not like going beating Bob Anderson, who ultimately, might throw a 180, and that's the highlight of his game. That's a solid win. And if he can go and turn over Terry Jenkins in impressive fashion, I think that will stand up, and he will come up against either the winner of DUDBRIDGE and DARREN, but he'll fancy himself against both of those people. He's not as wide. I was hoping for like maybe a 20 to 1 type of thing.
I think he opened around that, but I think people got quite wise to it quite quickly.
So I mean, 14s is, I don't think it's a bad price, and it's tough to back Thornton or Mitchell purely because they meet in the second round.
Exactly.
I wouldn't advise anybody doing that, because ultimately, one of them is going in the second round. Look, stranger things have happened and they might go in the first. It's incredibly unlikely. But yeah, in the second round, basically the first and third favourite, one of them's going out. And I think you'll see a lot of market movement, particularly after, as people are being played. People are playing and people do drop out. I think you're going to see people shorten, particularly, if you see some of your 100 to 1ers. I think you won't be shocked if they get a win and the prices are slashed in half, maybe even to a third after one win. So yeah, and I do like you shouted Darren Johnson as well. I think there's value in there. Again, just through simple logic of looking at the way the draw falls, it's not unrealistic at all. So yeah, it's honestly, it's the easiest to predict in terms of it's easy to go with some of the bigger names, but actually I think there's some value in the the 10 to 20 to 1 bracket, maybe just above, and then again some of them are priced at 100 to 1, and it's just incorrect because the bookies don't have a clue who they are really, so they've just slapped a price on it and hope for the best. So yeah, I think Richie Howson would be my Nap is if it's let's
go let's go with Richie Howson as the channeled selection at 16 to 1 with once a player if you can get it. The action does get underway very shortly, and I'm sure this market will move and reshape rapidly because we're going to lose some of the guys towards the top very quickly. As I was pointed out, one of Mitchell or Thornton going in the second round, and the way the first round draws worked out, we're going to lose some decent names very early on as well. But yeah, he's hoping by the time you watch this video, Richie Howson is still standing and he's managed to get past Dave Cameron. But an interesting tournament. Let us know who you're backing in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, and we'll be sure to roll Ozzy back out for the World Seniors Masters and Match Play as well, our seniors correspondent. Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon on Doubles and Trebles.